Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. It's Mr. Weimann, and I'm going to share with you a special tale today. It is called Otter and Otter, a love story. And throughout this story, the reading of this text, what I want you to do is listen for the theme. What is a theme? A theme is the message of a text. So here are a list of different themes that lots of literature has. This particular text has a theme, has like probably a few themes in it, and that happens oftentimes in stories. The main thing I want you to do is not just come up with a message. I want you to come up with reasons why you think that that is the message, right? You have to have evidence from the text. You can't just, say, it taught me this, and that's that, right? I want you to actually write a little paragraph right here. This is the first slide of this slideshow that I'm going to share with you. And in this paragraph, you're going to use the graphic organizer area. So you're going to answer the question, what is the theme? And then you're going to provide a reason or reasons, followed by explaining why you think these are the reasons for the theme, right? At the very end of this video, I'm going to talk about what I think was a very powerful theme from this book. And it's actually not one of the words listed here. So you want to pay close attention to that. Okay, the ancient Greeks talk about love in a variety of ways. There's 4 that they mention, and I'm not going to share the Greek term for it, but I just want to talk about what they describe love as. So the first one that people get squeamish about, and you guys are like, oh, is attraction. So when you're attracted to something, when you're like pulled emotionally, when you're drawn towards someone, and you might even think of it as magnetic, right? You can't help it. You're just attracted to something. It reminds me of our science lessons at the beginning of the year where we had magnets, and you got the magnet close enough to a piece of metal or another magnet, and that magnet just like attached to it. So that's one. That's only one of the 4 types, though. Another type of love is care, caring for someone. When you have deep feelings about someone, and I think of like a parent-child relationship, that parent will want to do anything for that child because he cares so much about that child and wants the best for that child. That is love, right? And it's a really different kind of love. A third kind of love is a loyalty. When you have allegiance to someone. Someone is like your partner, and you're not going to do anything to hurt that person because you care about them, but also you're loyal to them. Hurting them would be hurting you, right? So that's a type of love. And then the final type of love that Greeks talk about is agape. And I did use the Greek term here because it's so hard to put this particular kind of love into English. The best way to describe it is like unconditional. In other words, there's nothing you can do that will make me love you more, and there's nothing you could do that would cause me to stop loving you. My love is constant. It's unbreakable. I love you no matter what. And it's not an attraction. It's more than loyalty. You have deep feelings, but the feelings are so deep that like nothing can alter those feelings. It's commitment. And that is the highest, the most powerful, the hardest to achieve, to get to, but also the very best. And often the best is the hardest to get to achieve, to acquire. So those are the 4 kinds of love. Now, you can listen for those types of love as I read this story, Otter and Otter, and try, as you're listening to the text, to think about what the theme is. What is the message in the text? And then you're going to write a little paragraph about it. Otter and Otter, James Howe. The river sparkled the day Otter found love. He was not looking for it. Love, that is. He was looking for dinner. But when Otter gazed into those eyes, those round, sweet, glistening eyes, he knew that he had found what he had not known he was looking for. Impossible, he said. I am in love with my food source. He asked her name, not certain if she was a he or he was a she. Something about the eyes told him she. She said gurgle. But because he had water in his ears, Otter heard it as Myrtle and thought, such a beautiful name to match such beautiful eyes. And so it was that Otter fell in love with a fish. Myrtle, or Gurgle if you prefer, had not been looking for love either. She had been looking to stay alive. Please don't eat me, her round, sweet, glistening eyes pleaded with Otter, while he was gazing into them, finding love. All she wanted was a loosening of his grip, a slippery escape, a return to the safety of family and home. But then in his eyes she saw the sparkling river reflected, and a tender and lonely heart revealed, in the stirrings of her own heart, her own tremulous, fish not wishing to be dinner heart, awakened to something new and surprising. Not only love, but a future she could never have imagined. From that moment on, Otter and Myrtle were rarely apart. They swam together, they played hide-and-go-seek together, they told each other stories, hers of the depths of the river, his of the banks and beyond. They warmed their faces in the morning sun and silently considered the stars that filled the midnight sky. In a perfect world, it would now be written, and they lived happily ever after. In a perfect world, an otter could fall in love with a fish, and a fish with an otter, and that would be that. But it is not a perfect world, alas. And so that is seldom as simple as that. Have you heard about Otter? It began, the talking that is. He was always odd. Now he is odder. He has lost his mind, some said, unable to see that he had lost nothing, only found his heart. It isn't right. It isn't natural. It isn't the way of the otter. Day after day, night after night, Otter heard the talk and wondered, what is right? What is wrong? What is natural? What is the way of the otter? When he asked this question of Myrtle, she lowered her eyes, which appeared to Otter to fill with tears, though it was hard to tell since her eyes were always wet. The way of the otter, she told him, is why I can no longer swim with you, or play with you, or warm my face next to yours in the morning sun. Aww. A reed standing close leaned into Otter as if to be sure he was still breathing. Do you no longer love me? Otter asked, his voice little more than a whisper. I am no longer sure a fish can love an otter, Myrtle replied, when the way of the otter is to eat fish. Now Otter's eyes grew wet with tears. I must eat, he said. But must you eat my friends? Myrtle asked. My family? Otter had no answer. Feeling an old loneliness return, he watched Myrtle swim away. In a tragic tale, it would now be written, and so their love could never be. In a tragic tale, an otter could never love a fish, nor a fish love an otter. And that would be that. But this is not a tragic tale. Oh, thank goodness. It contains hope, and so the ending is yet to be written. Otter has come to his senses, it began, the talking that is. Now he will forget all about this falling in love with fish nonsense, some said, unable to know that falling in love is never nonsense. Otter tried not to listen, but in time he thought, they're right, it is impossible. You cannot love your food source. But when he warmed his face in the morning sun, he imagined Myrtle beside him, and when he gazed at the midnight sky, he saw Myrtle's eyes 1,000-fold. Is it the way of the otter, he wondered, to be alone? One morning, Otter floated his way to Beaver's house. Good morning, Beaver called out. Care for a bit of birch bark? Otter wrinkled his nose. Otters don't eat bark, he said, but thank you for your kindness. Ah, said Beaver. How about an apple, then? Otter shook his head. Apples are awfully tasty, Beaver went on. Tastier, I find, than fish. Wait, why is he saying that? Otter pulled himself up onto a log to look Beaver in the eye. Have you ever eaten fish? Otter asked. No, said Beaver, but I suppose I might if I ever fell in love with an apple. Wait, did he just talk about love? What's going on here? Beaver was known for his wisdom, and in that moment, Otter knew he had found the wisdom he had not known he was looking for. This reminds me of earlier in the story. Are you saying, Otter began. I am saying, said Beaver, that there is the way of the otter, and there is the way of the heart. This reminds me of the back of the book. It is up to you to decide which to follow. Otter ate a bite of the apple, a bite of the bark, and the fruit of a water lily, which he found to be especially delicious. Thank you, said Otter. You're welcome, said Beaver. And next time, bring Myrtle. There's some lovely plankton just on the other side of the dam. What? Did he just offer plankton to Myrtle if Otter got his head right? That night, Otter was considering the stars when he heard a familiar splish. Beaver told me I would find you here, Myrtle said as she swam up to him. My family was wondering if you would come play with us tomorrow. I would love to, said Otter. Perhaps we could have dinner together. Have you ever eaten the bark of the aspen tree? I could try it, Myrtle said. It's quite tasty, said Otter. Much tastier than fish. I don't know what I ever saw in fish. Myrtle wriggled against Otter's side. Except for you, dear Myrtle, he said. Except for you. It wasn't long before the talking began again. It isn't right. It isn't natural. It isn't the way of the otter. But Otter and Myrtle did not listen. They swam together. They played hide-and-go-seek together. They discussed the mysteries of life and love with Beaver while dining on plankton and apples and the fruit of the water lily. They warmed their faces in the morning sun and silently considered the stars that filled the midnight sky. And now it can be written. And they lived happily ever after. And that's the end of our story, Otter and Otter, a love story. I'm sharing this whole slideshow with you because the idea is for you to use the text and even the illustrations from a text in order to provide evidence to support your thinking, right? And I want to model that for you through this book. So what was the theme of this book, this story? The author calls it a love story. Was the theme about love? Was that the message that the author was trying to communicate? Well, oftentimes there are many messages that can be learned from a story. And I want to share with you what I think is the main message or theme of this particular text. It's a word that isn't in the list of words at the beginning of this slideshow. I provided a list that we talked about in class of different themes that many stories have. But this theme can be found quite often, and it's a theme that is so valuable to life and love. It's the word compromise. So, in this story, what I witnessed often was the idea of settling or deciding to give up something for something else in order to come together. Okay, so that's kind of what compromising is. It means to settle a disagreement in which each side gives up something or the result of such a settlement. So here's an example. We were both happy with the compromise we made. If you're in recess and one person wants to play a game and another person wants to play a different game, sometimes you can come to an agreement. Sometimes you can decide to play both or whatever. But even if you play both, there's always some kind of compromise. In order to play both, each game will have to be shorter than what either person probably would have wanted. Like, you probably would have wanted to play your game the entire recess time. That is a compromise. Or maybe, I was talking to Scarlett about this just yesterday, or maybe you say something like, well, you know what, I'm okay with playing my game tomorrow in order for us to play your game today, right? And so that's a compromise. You have to wait to play your game. And in the end, though, the main goal is for everyone to be happy, right? It's not a compromise if one person is not happy and the other person gets everything. That's not compromise. Compromise is when both sides give up a little, right? So what is the evidence from the text of this particular type of theme, The evidence is when Otter changed his eating habits, right? He no longer is going to eat fish. And also, the fish is giving up a little too, because she is going to spend time. She has to trust that Otter isn't going to eat her or her family, right? And so there's compromise on both sides, right? And that is the supporting evidence from the text. That's what I get out of the story. You might get something different, and that's how stories work. And you might learn a bunch of different messages or lessons. Also, especially these kinds of books, but all literature, it's always great to read something more than once, because you might get something new out of it the second time you read it, or multiple times. So, good luck writing your little paragraph with your evidence and using complete sentences to argue or promote your theme that you think this text has. You can use the ideas I shared, but make sure you use complete sentences and form a paragraph where you're answering the question, what is the theme, providing reasons and evidence and explanation. Good luck. I can't wait to see your work.